example, and I stress the word small example. There's a fund, a hedge fund in Texas that has bought about 400 million square hectares of land in Sudan over a 49-year lease for the equivalent of $25,000. And that includes, in perpetuity for the 49-year lease and also renewable, full exploitable rights to oil, logging, that both the projected value of the resources that are on the land, as well as projected profit from any type of exploitation, can be detached from whether or not that production has taken place. And that the financial stream, the expected financial stream of profits and so on and so forth, becomes the basis of investment, becomes the basis of trade, and in fact shapes also access whether or not you can do anything else on the land or not, and who owns it, who has rights, and so on. So just from this microcosmic example, because as I said, it's small even by South Sudanese standards, and we know of bigger cases elsewhere in Africa. If we interlink what Sam has just said with the actual facts on the ground in terms of trade and investment in Africa, then I think that we are facing quite a big challenge. How do we move this? Sorry, folks. Oh yeah, okay. Right? I think I'm there. Oh my God. Of what we have to understand by transformation. And the first thing to ask is that where is this transformation going to take place? You can look at it at two levels, at the very least, 2 or 3 levels. First is the transformation within the existing mining sectors themselves, in which case what we want to do is to reposition our control and our role and the integration of our economic and productive activity in discrete areas of that mining, whether it is geological surveying, whether it's exploration, whether it's marketing, value add, so on and so forth. You can take that approach. You can also look at an approach which also stresses the fact that there are other aspects. The whole question of transformation does not begin or end in mining. And in fact, to be honest, I think that's the most useful starting point in my view. And that we should be looking at transforming other areas of mining which are not export oriented, which are not primary commodity, the be all and end all in terms of our end of the market is primary commodity, but mining which is aimed at manufacturing and which itself involves the integration of manufacturing processes. Yesterday, Trump, for example, talked in terms of other mining resources, kaolin, phosphates, nitrates, whatever. No, nitrates are not like that. I mean, whatever. You know what I mean? Different salts, whatever it is. Now, so you can have that approach, or you can look to the fact that what are the wider linkages between a given mining sector and the transformation of the economy as a whole. I'll leave that last part out because the issue I'm supposed to address is the transformation of the mining sector itself rather than the wider economy. But I think it's important to bear those two things in mind. And of course, who is the beneficiary, who is the driver of this transformation? Now, I ask that question because, again, I think that we also, in supporting the initiative that is represented by the African Mining Vision, in supporting the potential point of departure, we also have to engage more deeply with some of the meanings and the conceptions, and therefore some of the strategic outcomes that can come from them. So if you have a transformation agenda, which is also predicated on continuing partnerships with foreign investment without radically altering their role or their scope and so on and so forth, that could be problematic. Or if you have a transformation agenda, which is predicated on greater access to the type of international financial markets which are suggested by what Sam has said, then of course, that too, all I can say is beware where you raise your money from, beware where you sell your produce to. In fact, beware of Greeks bearing gifts, except that Greece is in no position to give a gift to anybody at this point in time. So, but it leads us to the question of how we conceive of investment. One of the challenges I think that the African Mining Vision documents, show, is that there's a way in which investment is conceived of as a static sum of money. When I say static sum, or rather as a sum of money, as a cash flow, rather than relationships, rather than the way in which, so for example, when we discuss in terms of developing, development corridors and so on and so forth, there is a kind of conception of which involves, as I said, not every of partnerships and different markets, which actually lead us to the place where we are coming from and may not be exactly where we want to go. Or when we think of the kind of trade regimes that we have in which currently exist, we can also see that the extension of those trade regimes into the situation where everything is for trade, including your rights, not simply physical goods and services, but your rights, your and the whole anything that is alienable, as we can see in the case of the South Sudan example that I gave. But we also have to appreciate the fact that at the same time, the notion of growth that we are celebrating, or rather, which has the occasion for us to be a bit more bolder about our mining regime, okay, is a notion of growth which actually discounts many other factors as they are ongoing. We know that a lot of mining investment is long term. We know that by its very nature, a lot of the heavy investments are front loaded. You need a lot of investments in place before even the actual operationalization takes place. And you know that you can lock into even the current mining contracts which have long-term costs. One of those costs is mining depletion. Take a country like Ghana. On the face of the statistics, the economy has done very well from mining. If you take gold mining alone, it was what, $7.7 billion in 2000. By 2011, we were exporting $4.7 billion worth of gold. If you add that to the fact that in 2011 we exported $2.8 billion of crude, then you can say the country is doing very well. Okay. On the other hand, the rate of depletion in terms of mining has exploded. So that in 2011 it was worth 7.7% of GDP. That's massive. If you add that to the leakages that, let's say, for example, the Minister of Mines talked about yesterday, then actually the net gain and the net savings that you are making, if you're going to measure net gain and your investable resources and so on from how much you're saving, then actually it's going downwards. So that in 2000, the gross national saving related to mining could have been about 7% of gross national product, which means that you could actually, the potential to earn money from mining to invest, that's if you control all those rights, if you collected the rents, if you control them, would be 7.7%. In 2006, not in 2000. In 2011, it has dropped to 2%. Now, surely, this is a matter of concern, even for, not simply for mining contract, but the whole way in which we conceive of investment and trade regimes. And we can add to that the kind of particular competitive fact of the new scramble for Africa that, let's say, Dan referred to yesterday, which means that everything that we're doing in terms of trade and investment relations is in a competitive environment, where therefore there are winners and there are losers. Anybody who comes up with a win-win situation and so on and so forth, I'll either drank too much coffee or something worse, and so on. And on that basis, competition means that you have to not simply regulate foreign investment, you have to simply not make sure that you gain more from trade agreements, but actually that you also have to build a capacity, build enterprises, build gains at the expense of, very often, at the expense of those who are dominant at this point in time. So when you have the action plan of the African Mining Mission saying that we should ensure that our trade agreements, like in the WTO or the EPAs, do not constrain policy space for this thing. Actually, the whole document is replete with things like that. I think that those warnings are very, 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 very relevant. And let me very briefly go through some of what we face in terms of the current trade regimes that exist.